stop for a minute. Come, let me take a walk, through the tiki. You'll see our landmarks and our monuments. They're so unique. The hybrid structure, lighthouse, the tallest wooden structures, cathedral, 176 monuments, and the beautiful city hall. You know, with the wind in your hair, you're in the right place. Oh, that's my beautiful country. One people, one nation, one destiny.
$3.4 billion bypass has mutually been agreed to by Exxon and the government. Instead of pursuing a renegotiated deal which will see these sums in the Natural Resources Fund and therefore subject to parliamentary scrutiny and deliberation, the AFC sees this clever piece of scheming as allowing spendings at the behest of the PPP with no public institutional deliberation and scrutiny by the elected representatives of Guyana. This seems to be an escape route from transparency and good governance, and even the provisions of the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act and the Procurement Act. On the latter matter of procurement, the AFC notes that the company to build this Palmyra Stadium is Caribbean Green Building Incorporated. It was granted such a contract without any procuring process whatsoever. This is shameless. As regards the spending of this sum of $3.4 billion, the AFC's alternative approach would have been to enhance with small spanking stadiums and all other facilities the community grounds at Skeldon, Wim, Port Morant, Albion, Kanji Rosal, and Edinburgh. This approach would be far more beneficial and directly impactful for the young people and the sporting community in Region 6. We all know how well the PPP kills mockingbirds. The PPP is now venturing forth to kill a democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cameron. Can I ask Dr. Vincent Adams to make a statement now?
Hey, thanks, David, and thanks to the media for attending our press conference this afternoon. You know, I sat and I was listening to the Honorable Vice President press conference last Friday, and I could not believe my ears and my eyes. I think the vice, and I thought it was, you know, I was compelled to appear here on behalf of the AFC and on behalf of the people of Guyana, as a matter of fact, to show, you know, that the Vice President is doing a grave disservice to the people of Guyana, if not a betrayal of their trust, to the people whom he's supposed to be representing, and whom he's supposed to be serving, and whom he's supposed to be truthful toward. Instead, this Vice President is aiding and abetting Exxon's reckless violation of our nation's laws and health, safety, and environmental principles to satisfy Exxon's interests through greed and making money, and could care less of how and what they leave of our country after these short 20 to 30 years of exploiting our wealth. One, I could not believe that the Vice President, and he keeps saying this, that of course, I'm sure that he meant also the past coalition that I worked for as head of the EPA, that I signed Lisa 1 and 2 document, the permits, which were the worst permits on the planet, and he had to fix it. Well, that's a blatant lie. Mr. Parshram, who was acting at EPA before I arrived, signed that permit, the Lisa 1 permit, 17 months before I arrived in Guyana to take up that position at the EPA. Mr. Parshram signed that permit on June 1 of 2017. I arrived in Guyana on October 1 of 2018. That permit, which is what the Vice President is calling the worst permit in the planet, was corrected in Lisa 2, which I signed. And the Vice President is taking credit for everything else after Lisa 2. Well, guess what happened after I left? Everything in Lisa 2 was copied into all of the permits that now the Vice President is taking credit for. So the vice president ought to level with the people, and I think that the media and the people of Guyana should hold him to come and do his fact checking whenever he makes these statements. Besides that, how could the vice president, he's even throwing the executive director under the bus. How could he say it's the worst permit that was written, which is Lisa 1, but you go and you hire the same person to run the EPA after he has written that you're now complaining about. So he's even questioning his own judgment. Now the other question that that should be asked is, now I hear the vice president is talking about the parent company. He made a statement. I'm not sure what the statement means in terms of impact, but he said that he's also concerned that there should be a parent company guarantee. Well, that is so laughable now. I'm happy that, or we all should be happy that he's finally come around, because I remember when I years ago when I made the statement that there was a parent company guarantee requirement, he said I was making this stuff up. Then he appears on Glenn Larry's show and he read the company guarantee that is in the permit, which is the legal requirement. He read it, except that he didn't say that it was not being enforced. So now I want to know, what is he asking the EPA to do in terms of the parent company guarantee? It's there already. The only thing, Mr. Vice President, that you should be doing is telling EPA to enforce the laws of the land, period. A parent company guarantee is there to cover all costs, unlimited parent company guarantee. The insurance, they claim it's $600 million. The spill in the Gulf, the British petroleum spill in the Gulf was $145 billion US. So who pays whatever is over and above that 600 million? That's what the parent company guarantee does. Why isn't Exxon wanting to sign a parent company guarantee, by the way, that is not costing them anything? It's obvious. Exxon has no intention of covering such costs. We should impose that or enforce that they have to do. So that's all you've got to do, Mr. Vice President. So don't let us beat around the bush and let us be out to distract to say, well, you're concerned. You ought to be concerned, but do something about it. That's your job. Do something about for the people. Here's the other thing the Vice President said. The Vice President went on again to shamelessly talk about flaring and how somehow the conditions for flaring was improved. That's absolute nonsense. When during my tenure and during the coalition's tenure, in the permits it says flaring is prohibited. Flaring is prohibited. Not only did the coalition say that, during the transition in 2020, when the Vice President thought that the Payara permit was being delayed somehow, the Vice President went and they got this lady, Miss Alison Redford, from Canada, who their consultant. She came, she formed a team of the EPA, the GGMC, and the Department of Energy. We all were and unanimously said that there shall be no flaring. And by the way, there shall be no dumping of water into the ocean. That even Miss Redford was even more adamant than we were in terms of completely stopping that. We met with Exxon and told them they've got to put in the equipment to re-inject that water back into the reservoir and to stop flaring. As soon as I left, all of that was abandoned, and now the Vice President is now coming and saying, well, okay, flaring is more restricted because now you're paying a fee to flare. That flies in the face of all environmental principles, because what you're basically saying, as long as you could pay to pollute, go ahead and pollute as much as you want. The other thing, he mentioned the standard, the 60-day standard, meaning that you're allowed 60 days of flaring after start. Do you know what that team on Alison Redford was imposing at Exxon? We told him it was 48 hours. So for him to come now and brag about 60 days when his own consultant and his own government officials said that 48 hours is the standard, and that standard was adopted from the United States of America standard. So don't come and don't try to kerfuffle people and fool people, and try to let it appear as if you're improving the standard when in fact you're decreasing, you're diminishing it. The standard, by the way, the standard calls for re-injecting the water. And here he says, here's the other thing that I think that the media need to immediately challenge the vice president. The vice president claims that Guyana is among only the few countries, I need to go back and check the quote, and you can, the countries that are following international standards for treating the water before dumping it. And the other countries that are not treating this water, the media need to challenge the vice president to name those countries right now. Name those countries and name the companies that are doing that. If you're such a steward of the international environment, name it. Because I guarantee you, you cannot name anybody. The water that is being dumped into the ocean right now, instead of being re-injected, it's almost 3 times hotter than the water of the ocean. The other thing is it contains radioactivity. It contains all types of toxic metals and materials. And more on top of that, it contains oil in the water. The treatment that he's talking about is not to treat radioactivity and all this toxic stuff. It's to remove some of the oil. But there's still a concentration that is left in there. And if you do a calculation, a cursory calculation, at the end of these projects, we will have dumped hundreds of thousands, listen to me, we will have dumped hundreds of thousands of barrels of pure oil into the ocean just by dumping that water. So that is what this vice president is bragging about. But again, I plead with you, the vice president, or to the people and to the international community, to name the countries that he claimed that dumping water, produce water without treatment. And the other thing is, he talks about the standard. Ask him, doesn't he know that the standard is re-injecting the water back in the reservoir, which is what the coalition when I was there, and under Alison Redford told Exxon to do, that they've got to re-inject the water. Then finally, this was a doozy. The vice president keeps talking about this cradle to grave stuff. It rolls nicely off of its tongue. It sounds nicely. It's just like music to him. Keeps talking about it, and I thought that I slammed that since I left there when he started talking about it. But now he's raising it again. The vice president wouldn't even know if cradle to grave hit him between his eyes what it is. So let me tell you what it is. When I arrived, Exxon was taking all of its waste, the millions of tons of waste, and then handing it over to these treatment facilities such as Tiger Tank and the rest of them, and washing their hands and saying, listen, Tiger Tank, you guys are responsible for that waste. I said, absolutely not. You, Exxon, will be responsible for that waste from the time it is generated, transported, treated, buried. That's what cradle to grave means. And before I left there, we directed Exxon to do that and to write the documents, the procedures for doing that. So for him to come and start taking credit is just totally ridiculous, untruthful, and dishonest. Where is this vice president? I want to know. I think people need to ask, where is this vice president who said, and he's on video, that's the other thing, he said he never said some of these things, except that now technology doesn't allow him to get away with it. Where is the vice president who said that our people should be sad with every oil that is there, every barrel of oil that is discovered? Where is the vice president who said that our patrimony was stolen from us under the coalition? Where is the vice president who shouted from the rooftop that it was the worst contract in the world and he would renegotiate fairness for the people when he gets into the office? what has motivated this Honorable Vice President to make such a major change of heart? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vince. And now can I ask Ricky to make his presentation?
Thank you, David, and good evening to all. The AFC noted the daring Facebook political gaffe by the president trying to defend the 15% given to the indigenous people through the budgetary allocation and not directly as he stated, which is totally untruthful. As we follow, the AFC proposes that 25% of the carbon credit money to be issued to the Amerindian indigenous people. He further stated that the APNUFC tenure in government, that when we took away 2,000 CSOs jobs that worth over some $4 billion. The AFC would like to debunk another untruthfulness by this government. When the APNUFC took office in 2015, we found a cabinet document stated clearly that they cannot continue with the CSO program because it was costing the government too much money. We even found a cancelled check when the program ended, which indicated that the PP will not continue the program. Former cabinet member can attest to this. The APNUFC government did not fire the CSOs, as was stated by His Excellency. What the coalition did was to implement the Hinterland Employment and Youth Service, which is called the AIS, which is well known as the AIS program, to uplift the indigenous people standard, which is far more effective and useful, especially the youth. This program had two components, one for business and the other for practical. We trained over 4,000 youths, where each one was giving $100,000 in 2 trenches as a grant. The indigenous youths were trained in areas such as electricians, joinery, tourism, agriculture, cattle, and poultry rearing, that is. The AFC gathered information that recently that Tushaus are not concerned over the CSOs, are concerned over the CSOs and the work that they are doing. It was also mentioned by the president that we toss aside the LCDS, but let us put this record straight. The LCDS is a substandard document that was rubbished by many consultants and international organizations. That is why we had to give rise to the GSDS, the Green State Development Strategy, that is far more superior policy that take into consideration the ordinary Guyanese. Under this strategy, we have put all forested land under the 4th parallel for conservation purposes that earns us millions of US dollars from the Norway. That this regime is running from because the Norwegian policy is clear. You have to have transparency and must have a project design that benefit the people directly before you can access that money. We all can remember what happened to the solar projects and the one laptop for family. The AFC also raises serious concern on the government on the governance by this current regime, who portray themselves to be superior. If this is the case, why didn't the government auction the carbon credits that were assessed and invite bidders to ensure transparency and accountability and to ensure we get a better value for our forest carbon that will be higher than the US $15 that they're currently getting? One must recall when we found oil that the current vice president cussed us out, that we signed a rotten deal, and that we should have auctioned our remaining blocks. My question again is why didn't they auction the carbon credits unless there's a side deal? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Vincent and Ricky. I'd now open the channel for questions, and please, I'm asking you to please observe the usual protocols. Either raise your hand or indicate you would like to ask a question, and state the news organization which you represent and to whom the question is directed. Questions can be asked now. Thank you. Adam Harris.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Adam Harris, Guyana News Online. This question is for Vince, Dr. Adams, sorry. Now, you talk about the water being untreated when it's returned to the ocean. Now, sir, wasn't there an inspection group that monitored the operation of the oil rigs out there and therefore would have reported to the government on what is happening?
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I'm going to address part of in terms of building capacity, but the water is partially treated. The vice president is making it sound as if Guyana is probably only or one of the few countries that are treating the water. The only thing that is being treated in that water is for the oil. All of the different contaminants, mercury, lead, radioactivity, all that stuff is not being treated for. It's the oil, because when the oil comes up, it comes up mixed with the water, so you've got to separate the water from the oil. Well, there's still some oil left in the water. So that's what they're being dumped. That's what's being dumped instead of being reinjected back into the reservoir, which is the standard. Exxon themselves says that they follow the World Bank standards, and the World Bank standard says you must re-inject into the reservoir unless it's technically or financially feasible. Well, you can't dispute that it's more than technically feasible and more than financially feasible. However, it's cheaper for Exxon. So even though the coalition and Alison Redford, by the way, stopped it, the current government decided, forget about that, we're going to go ahead and do it. Now, in terms of, so to answer one part of your question, no, the water is not fully treated, but the vice president gave the impression that it is in Guyana, but the rest, certain parts of the world, and again, I ask the media, please, the vice president owes it to the people of the nation and the world and the countries to name those countries and companies that are dumping water into the ocean, without even doing the treatment that we're doing for removal of the oil. In terms of inspection, that's one of the issues that we have, Adam. We do not have continuous inspection. In fact, when I arrived, one of the things that was even changed in the second permit, and which the contract called for, we were supposed to be giving Exxon 7 days notice to visit that site. And we said, absolutely not, that's not going to happen. We have unimpeded access to that site, up to and including unannounced visit. That was changed. However, obviously, in practical terms, we didn't have the capacity, we didn't have the resources to go there at any time. So what the coalition did when I was there is to implement a capacity building program. And it had a component where even the EPA were going to sponsor employees to start with, to go to university or wherever they want to go to. And we were going to pay, we're going to sponsor them. And then they've got to come back and serve at least 4 years. You know what? This, as soon as I left, when in the meantime, the employees started applying and getting admissions. When they asked them if it's going to continue, you know what they told them? What the executive director told them? That they've got to understand that EPA is not a university. So that's the narrow-mindedness. Here's the other thing, Adam. As part of that program, we were planning to have a 24/7 on-site presence. I talked about this also. We got $1 million from the World Bank to help us set up that program. They brought in an expert. We set up a program to have 24/7 coverage with highly specialized employees. We were going to put it in the 2020 budget, except that, you know what happened in 2020? There wasn't any budget. We had it all ready for that budget. When I left, they abandoned that plan from the World Bank. And when we brought it up again, they said that never existed. And when the cover of the plan appeared on the front page of the newspapers, they started backpedaling and saying, and the response to that was to move all of Exxon files into the executive director's office under lock and key. So that's how they respond. And then they talk about transparency every time. You know, it's nauseating every time they talk about transparency. That's the kind of question the media need to challenge them. Why did they separate Exxon's files from all of the other operators, the 2,000 operators? Why did they take Exxon file and put it under lock and key in the executive director's office when the process for handling files does not say, that's violating the process for handling files at EPA? Why is Exxon being treated so specially? What is there to hide for Exxon? So Adam, the point is, the plan was to have 24/7 on-site presence under the coalition. We had the World Bank coverage with it. We had an entire organization structure with a 36-member. It was going to start with a 36-member unit of highly specialized people. When I left, they abandoned that plan. So there's no plan for doing that anymore, to understand what is going on there in real time. So whatever Exxon tells us, we've got to accept. That's the situation we have, which is a dangerous situation. And not only are we accepting it, the vice president is defending everything that Exxon is saying. You know, everything. It doesn't matter what they're saying. He is defending them against his own people. That's what's going on here. That's what all of these untruthfulness are about. It's to defend Exxon. Exxon, do you hear Exxon even trying to defend themselves? They don't have to. They've got an entire government that is doing that. That's the dilemma that we're in.
Thank you, Vince. Adam, just allow me to also expand just very quickly on this question, because Vince is addressing the question of the wastewater that comes up when you drill, when you bring up oil and those things like that. But I also want to expand on an issue which is the waste, the village, or whatever they call it, that use the correct name, by the vessels that we now have. Right now we have 2 SPSOs operating. They said at the end of this quarter, third one will be there. And each one of these vessels have 5 to 6, each one of these SPSOs have 5 to 6 service vessels that travel to them every single day. So right now, the 2 SPSOs have about 15 to 20 vessels that would commute between Georgetown or Trinidad to these vessels. And then every day we have oil tankers collecting oil from the SPSOs, you know, because we're producing so I heard almost 400,000 barrels a day. All these vessels produce waste, village, you know, and other effluents, and they're all dumped into the ocean. So if you project to say 2027, when there is reported we'd have 5 SPSOs in that small area, and that 5 SPSOs will have about 60 vessels traveling every year, and 60 and 10 oil tankers every single day. We are saying that right now is the time for you to have a comprehensive waste management plan, not only for the wastewater comes up with the drilling, but also for the whole waste disposal from all these vessels. I mean, we know it's happening. The PUP is going there with it's simply a formality. I think the CEO has to set out all their applications as a formality. And at some point in time, it will become an issue. And one of the points that we're trying to make is you have a comprehensive wastewater management system, put it in place now so that all investors, and they have to do it in other countries. You can't go into California, the Gulf of Mexico, and operate as you are here in Guyana. So it's not just limited to the water extracted. The whole entire wastewater management plan, we're asking them they should address it now. So everybody, so they can design their ships to it. They can tell their ships, tell their suppliers, and so these are the laws that are operating in Guyana, so they can adhere to it prior to even coming into our waters. Thank you.
A quick follow-up. Again, Mr. Adams, during your tenure, you said there was a policy of no flaring.
Yep.
Meaning that it was written into the statutes of the EPA. But I heard the Vice President say flaring can be done on a limited scale, and if they abuse that scale, then there is we call it a penalty. Now, when was the no flaring policy amended? And was this amendment made public? Did the EPA say anything? I can't get anybody in the EPA to ask a single question to, because nobody is answering.
Let me answer that several questions in terms of the EPA. You recall again, during the coalition when I was there, we were in the media every single day. As a matter of fact, we had a program on the television, NCN, and every place else, like I can't remember how many times a week, to make sure that we were open with the public. It was clear, transparent. I was out there. So totally different now, totally different now. People are hiding files in the executive director's office, and all never happened under the coalition. Now, in terms of flaring, Exxon, and this is these are documented stuff, by the way. Before even Lisa 1 started, and I wasn't there, but it so happened that when the flaring started, we had several meetings, and the people who were there had it documented in their notes. Exxon promised, during the discussions and the negotiation, promised that there will be no flaring from day one. Those are the exact words. I have written about this. I've talked about this even when I was at the EPA when flaring started. When Lisa 1 started up in December of, what is that, 2019?
2019, that's correct.
2019. Everybody were in total shock when the flaring started, because they promised there shall be no flaring from day one. We've got all the technology. So we started having all these meetings with the EPA, with the Department of Energy, with Exxon, almost on a daily basis. And they begged us to give them 30 days until they fix their stuff. Okay, we gave them 30 days. In the meantime, the flaring wasn't just really bad, because the production wasn't, they had to ramp up production. They asked for 30 days. Flaring still continued. They asked for 60 days. It still continued. Then 90 days. And we decided, myself and Dr. Bino, they decided that's enough. The EPA had to shut them down to safe operating limit from, at the time was 90,000 barrels a day, I think, to about 20,000 barrels a day to keep at the safe operating limit, giving them a limited time to fix it, or else they were going to be shut down completely until they get it fixed. They went, they fixed it. But as soon, and it says, by the way, in the permit, it says flaring is prohibited unless under 3 conditions. Startup, because when you're starting up, you got to test out the system. You're going to have a little bit of flame maybe for a few hours, etc. Emergency, if something happens, you've got gas in the system, you've got to burn it off before you flare it. That's also maybe for a few seconds or a few minutes. And on the maintenance, when you're doing maintenance, you got to check out the system, etc. Could you believe that, what Exxon tried to pull on us when I was there? That startup would last for, they were selling oil in the market, producing at 90,000 barrels per day, and saying that they're still in startup mode, which was absolutely ridiculous. So we shut that down, and we shut this. We said, hey, you got to stop flaring. Okay. What happened was after the coalition left office, the government, and you remember I told you under the Alison Redford team and the government official, we imposed a 48-hour startup period, which is the same standard as the United States. You cannot flare for more than 48 hours. They decided to change the permit that when I say I, meaning the coalition, on behalf of the coalition and the EPA, under my tenure, they decided to go ahead and change that permit to give Exxon 60 days of flaring. And even when you exceed that 60 days, then you start paying this paltry fee. And I've written about this. Well, guess what? All you got to do to stop flaring is to cut back on your production by a certain level, because every barrel brings up a certain amount of flare. And Exxon was making 25 to 30 times the amount of money in the fines that they were paying by flaring. So it was an incentive for them to continue to flare because then they're gonna have to fix their equipment. The government has removed that restriction where we said that there shall be no flaring. So now, basically, what the permit has in them is that Exxon can flare unlimited quantities as long as you can pay for it. But then I've written about this, by the way, so I can send you a whole bunch of stuff. What that means, any operator, all they've got to do, the Exxons in the water, say, well, okay, I'm going to negotiate with the Ministry of Finance. You charge me $50 per ton. I'm going to tell you I'm going to produce X number of tons of carbon dioxide, and this is what my check is going to be. You don't need an EPA. Get rid of the EPA and just let everybody pay to pollute. So that's what we have now, and it's shameful that the vice president is bragging that we're collecting money for polluting. That it flies in the face of all environmental principles. You do not pay to pollute, you prevent pollute. This here is incentivizing pollution at the expense, by the way, at the expense of people's health, safety, and the environment. What is our country gonna be when Exxon is gone big, fat, and happy and rich 20 to 25 years from now? What are they gonna leave our country? And by the way, that gas that goes up in the atmosphere, it has like over 200 pollutants. And I'm talking about toxic stuff. And you know what it forms? It forms acid, what is called acid rain. And it falls, because it stays in the clouds, comes back down as acid, and it gets into our clean water, into our farms and everything else, and damages everything. Rust. It rusts your equipment, your cars, your houses. Damages the entire environment in addition to the ecology. So that's what that's the problem we have with the current government, changing the rigorous environmental laws that we had in place, and then just outlandishly claiming that they have improved the environment when it's a complete opposite. And the documentation are there to prove it. It's not a case where you're just making up. It's there. The documentation are there. That's the thing that really should be bothering every single Guyanese. That is just an in-your-face lies.
Thank you very much, Vince. Are there any other questions from anyone else? Yes, Guyana Crystal, Christine John, you have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon. This question is for Mr. Ramjutan. So will the AFC be participating in LGE? If not, will it be showing its support behind the APNU?
Kamraj has directed to you.
You want to start?
No.
Myself.
Yeah. Did you hear the question, Kamraj?
I didn't hear the latter part of it.
Yeah.
It's something to do with.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Sorry about that, Christine.
Sure. So I just wanted to know if the AFC will be participating in LGE, and if not, will it be showing its support behind the APNU?
No, we are certainly not participating, and we have stated our reasons why. And we are going to ask, I personally will ask that, people do not turn up, boycott the thing. We are not supporting the arrangement here that might be for other parties. We are boycotting on very good grounds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Adam, I see Hannah, but I see Davina. Can I ask if you allow Davina to ask her question and then Adam?
Of course, of course.
Did that answer your question, Euro? Davina?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My first question to the AFC panel today. The Environmental Protection Agency has waived the need for an environmental impact assessment for the government's 300 megawatt power plant that it intends to build at Wales. I know the party has often said that this project should be backed by adequate studies. So can anyone from the panel say if the party has opposed this decision by the agency to waive the EIA requirement, or is the parties in support of the waiver of the study?
Well, Vince, you want to start or do you want me to start? Because I would have some conclusion.
Yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Good question, Davina. I have seen that the EPA's waiver, which is very falsely states that because because the country has generators before, there is no need for a waiver. There's no need for a study on this, which is totally ludicrous. First, this here will be our first natural gas producing plant, if it ever is built. Totally different circumstances, totally different environment under which we operate in. Secondly, the volume of gas that is going to be used, 50 million cubic feet per day, is the largest amount we ever had on board. We never had before. So we actually don't support it. We actually do think that there should be a full investigation, EPA investigation. And obviously, this is backed by the comments being made by the Vice President and others who moved away from the point that the gas is sure is just for power. And they're now speaking about natural gas industries. They're now speaking about exporting natural gas. So obviously it would have been preferable, and we probably will still insist that they do a full investigation. You can remember, Davina, in 2020, when the government presented their 2020 budget, they promised this country, they budgeted in 2020 that there would be full studies, geographical, geotechnical, marine studies, environmental, and there will be full studies, and they will be made public before this project goes ahead. Nothing has been made public so far. So we do think that EPA has dereliction of duty. That EPA should have conducted a full study. Obviously, as the EPA has been going at the moment, I don't know, they have just simply become a rubber stamp agency. People have to carry them to court, and I do expect that some of the residents in the area will carry them to court. They think like gas dispersion. If there's a leak, how will that be done? How will that be handled? There's several other issues that has to be addressed by EPA before the Wales plan can be given the go-ahead. So no, we don't support what the EPA has done.
Thanks, Dave. Here again, sometimes you wonder. People keep saying, "Are we in a real country or what?" And let me add to what David is saying. Besides them making a commitment to do these studies, the agreement with Exxon says specifically for any gas to shore project, there has to be a feasibility study. It's in that document. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, this here is true to form. Do you remember the bridge? When the EPA in 2020, just after I left, in December of 2020, the EPA followed the process. The engineers and everybody came out and made an announcement in the newspapers that the bridge will require an EIA. Guess what the government did? Against their own staff and process, and EPA came out a couple of months afterwards without even notifying the staff that there will not be an EIA for the bridge, and then asking the staff now, these poor staff, to go and defend them in public. I know how these staff are feeling. They're feeling very uncomfortable. It's the same thing that is happening here now. They're asking the staff to go there in public and defend things that they do not believe in. To add to what Dave is saying, and Davina, I'm sure you know it because I think you may have written about it. The EIA for the pipeline project itself says that there will be a separate EIA for this plant. It says that in that document. And then when you ask the question, say, well, it falls into the footprint. Absolute nonsense. How could you get a big project like this without an EIA? That's what an EIA is for. An EIA, by definition, what it does, it identifies risk, hazards, and you can only understand how to address these, how to mitigate it, what would be your response plan if you identify it. And the only thing that identifies these hazards, it's an EIA that does it in detail. So without an EIA, you do not know what risk you have, you do not know what hazards you have, there's no detailed studies. So let's say there's how are you going to respond? How are you going to respond? So it's absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, I feel so sorry for the staff at EPA. I know a lot of times they get blamed for it, but obviously they're being forced to do things that they do not believe in. Here's another question I want the media to ask the Honorable Vice President. What has been the attrition rate at the EPA? People are leaving the EPA, just again, the place now has become a place where nobody wants to be. We were under the coalition. We were getting hundreds of applications every single week. They wanted to come. And the people who are leaving are the highest qualified folks. Let them tell you how many people have left in the past year, even in the past month. And these are the most highly qualified, technically skilled people. And all they're doing, they're sending people with no experience, no experience, no education level whatsoever in environmental protection. Those are the people that they're sending at the EPA now, while the entire staff, those who could probably go find a job, even at Exxon is even hiring some of them away. So that's what we have now. The EPA staff, I'm very sympathetic towards them. They can't do any better, really. They don't believe in what they're doing, but they're forced to do what they're doing. You watch it, there are going to be people going and defend the same project we're talking about. And I know for sure they're very uncomfortable about it, but they're forced to do it.
David, if I can just chip in to speak quickly, that I think is very important, and I think Vince alluded to this EIA that was brought to the gas ashore project, especially the pipeline that will be coming in, the gas that will be coming onshore. In that EIA, there's an absence of what you call a gas leak management plan, and I spoke about in my presentation at Parliament. That seems of no concern. And now that you are going to do a plant without an ESIA, if there's a hazard, as Vince pointed out, what is your mitigation? And this is what the EIA has pointed out, your mitigation method and so on. So I just want to point out clearly that they're operating here without a proper gas leak management plan. Thanks, David.
But Davina, just add quickly, Davina, in any case, Davina, you know very well too, that even when you have it in the EIA and you have it in the permit, they're not even implementing it. You remember, we've got a situation right now in the case of an oil spill. You know it as well as I do. The EIA says that the safe operating limit of Liza 1 is 120,000 barrels per day. And because it's 120,000 barrels per day, the EIA says the operating limit should be 100,000 barrels per day, which is standard. Normally, when you set the safe limit, you go about 20% below the safe limit. As you set as your operating limit, so you can't exceed your safe operating limit. Do you know what the Liza 1 is producing at right now? Well, I know that you know, Davina. 152,000 barrels per day. Over 25%, was it 25 to 30% above the safe operating limit, all through greed and putting the entire country and the entire Caribbean in danger. And on the backside, you're saying you're not, if something happens, which you're increasing the risk of it happening, you're not even going to cover, you can't even give a guarantee that you're going to cover the cost if something happens. So even if it's in an EIA, Davina, I'm not even sure whether an EIA means anything anymore to the people of Guyana, because you're not even following what's in the EIA.
Thank you, Vince. Can I go to Adam, then Devon Vickery, then Davina, you can come again.
No. Sir, since I asked a question, I'd allow Javon Vickery to have his second on this.
Mr. Vickery, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Harris. My question is off the topic. This is for Mr. Patterson. Recently, we've seen a trend where accidents, people hitting into poles, have caused major, sometimes widespread blackouts. We've had cars, buses, trucks hit poles before and never having this widespread blackout, I should say. Do you think that this is an excuse this is an excuse that we're seeing, or could this be an actual problem that might have been overlooked sometime and we're now seeing the effects of people hitting major infrastructure and causing these blackouts?
Javon, I've spoken about this here numerous times, and you're absolutely right. In the 21st century, in a country, an oil-producing country, a car hitting a pole should not shut down the power infrastructure for the entire country. An excavator, I heard an excavator touching a wire while doing its job should not shut down the entire country. And I heard today, because I apologize for the 3-hour delay, we had 3 hours blackout. And I'm seeing on social media that because there was a fire in Lombard Street and some of the wires above that building were scarred or burnt, and that caused the 3-hour blackout. If you can recall, and we've been saying this consistently from 2018, not from 2017 to 2018, when the coalition came into power, we found the most decrepit GPL. It was on its knees, it was on life support. We, unlike now, we did not go around or start off blaming anybody or pointing fingers or something like that. We just set about fixing the cause. In 2016 and 2017, the board of GPL went internationally around the world for a new CEO, and they used the procurement firm, I think was Ernest Young International, and they recruited a Jamaican national, Mr. Albert Gordon, and he commissioned a study by Siemens, which was a grid stability study, which means basically how stable or unstable our grid is. And by the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, it was discovered that there were at least 17 is a number I can recall off the top of my head, 17 different factors that can bring the entire system as we are now total shutdown. And obviously what we did, we started progressively trying to reduce the number. I mean, it's exactly what you're speaking about, a car hitting a pole, a fire, a transmission line going down, in some cases an animal being electrocuted and shorting out the system. And we spent a lot of time and money reducing the 17 different factors. I mean, and I think we progressively, and the country knows it as well, persons just don't want to readily admit it, that we were able to reduce it. So therefore, by the end of 2020, by mid-2020, end of 2019, because we were quite cognizant that we were going to elections. So by the end of 2019, no vehicle hitting a single pole would block out the entire country. What has happened since 2020? They reported, they brought back the former CEO, who's ill, and I do hope he makes a good recovery. They've stopped doing maintenance. They've gone back to the same issue. They stopped doing the maintenance, which we, just like Vince and other things, we empowered GPL to do. We give them a lot of money, a lot of equipment, a lot of training. So GPL staff were doing the maintenance. Most importantly, Javon, what they started doing, because this is what we discovered in 2015, under the guise of public procurement, they started opening back out tenders for, say, small things like spacers and fuses and those things like that. And then they started going back to the lowest bidder. What we did from 2015 to 2020 is we went to the manufacturers of the best products. So therefore, obviously, when we bought a fuse or a spacer, isolator, we went to the European companies, and so they've gone back using what they said, how they call it the procurement method, and they have these middlemen who go and buy. Sorry to say, because China does produce good product, but they started buying back these cheap plastic spacers, these cheap plastic products that give you 3 months only of service. So, and they started installing them once again. We moved away from that because we recognized as one of the 17 inferior products with one of the 17 reasons why our system. So we reverted back, and they've just done this to enrich their friends. You know what I mean? They said, oh, it was awarded by a public procurement. But if you award something and to the lowest bidder, they will give you the cheapest product, and that's what we're happening. So everything that we have done, they've rolled back so far. That is why we're getting where we're getting. And it will get even worse when you put 300 megawatts, if it ever happens, that in 2024, 2025. Right now, GPL is producing 160. You're going to add 300 megawatts onto the system. So that's almost 460, 500 megawatts. We can't even transmit the 160 that we have at the moment without breaking on the system. When you put this extra 300 megawatts, if they ever do, you know for sure that will cripple the system. You know what I mean? That will fry a lot of all the inferior parts that they've been buying and installing now. The second you turn on that gas to show power, fry all those cheap parts that we're having. So, but it's their mentality, because obviously the PPP believes in enriching their friends and family. So instead of going back to the manufacturers, because electricity generation around the world has been going on for hundreds of years, 200 years maybe. They're best products, they're quality products, but if you do that, you cut out the middleman. What the previous boards on the GPA used to do, we did a study with Siemens study, and they said the best producers of
Equipment,
A, B, and B, you know what I mean? And these areas, and they give you a list. And we asked those companies to provide us with quotes, selected the best quote, and then we bought from them. Right now, they say that they want a spacer, and they go open bid. A guy goes to a factory in China, and he gets it for 1 cent, and they say, oh, value for money. Not value for money. They're just enriching their friends at the detriment of the whole country.
Just if I'm allowed a follow-up question. You said that what we're seeing now in terms of the accidents and everything else were part of something that you were trying to prevent before. Mr. Patterson, worst case scenario, if this is not rectified, what could we see? Worst case scenario.
Listen to me right now, and I'm giving you the safe scenario based on the fact, right, that they're claiming that the gas assure project will be operating ended by 2024 next year. Everyone knows that wouldn't be the case if you don't address it now. Right now, there's a deficiency in power supplies because nothing is working. So for the next 2 years, when they are depending on bringing that, if we start addressing these issues, these 17 issues, it's probably gone back up to 17. Every single day as we're having now, we'll be having power failures. The transmission lines are still there. What we did under my tenure is that we started running new transmission lines. You know what I mean? So therefore, if the one going from Kingston to Fire, which goes along the embankment, is damaged, that we had another line running from Garden Eden to Sophia, and then we had a line running from Kingston to Garden Eden. So therefore, obviously, if one of those lines are damaged, it doesn't bring down the system. They've abandoned all of these plans. We ran alternative, there was a submarine cable between Freedom Hoop and Kingston that was always damaged. We ran 2 additional submarine cables from Freedom Hoop to Princess Street, and then one from Freedom Hoop all the way to Garden. So in other words, if the one of them fails, the other will be able to take proper load to ensure that we don't have this concept of it. They've stopped all of that. So therefore, obviously, if we don't start addressing that, what is happening now will always continue happening. I mean, with the amount of construction that we have, with the increase of cars that we have, the possibility of an accident happening has expanded exponentially. So if we don't start addressing these issues and urgently, what we have now will continue. But what they've been doing is simply saying to the people, when this Wales project is finished, blockouts will finish, and which is a total lie. So if we don't start addressing these issues now, and if they don't take the moat out of their eyes and unashamedly go back to the plans that we had, sorry, Javon, there's nothing can help us.
Quick question. Sorry.
Yeah.
A quick question.
Yes, Adam.
A quick question for Ricky. Now, in your statement, you talk about cabinet documents showing that the PPP was actually contemplating shutting down the CSO program. And you saw that international exports reached the LCDS. Now, I would like to believe that you have evidence, the documents that you're prepared to share with us. Because it would be one thing for us to talk and for the Vice President to come back and still be lying. It would be another thing to present with the evidence. Do you have documentation, sir?
Yes, actually, Dawn is out at a jurisdiction, and when she get back, we are going to try to get a document there. But Mr. Camarado was also former.
Yeah, I was cabinet room.
Cabinet.
And I will tell you that indeed, document signed by Roger Lunsford called the cabinet people. I think David Patterson was also there.
Yes, of course, I as well. So, I think it was in Parliament as well too.
That's right.
And it was in Parliament as well, Adam. A bit of research if you ask the Parliament staff. I could probably do it in collaboration with obviously, but it was a document in Parliament with late, I think, with either Joseph Harmon or Don Hastings Williams or Sidney Alcock during their presentation laid over that document, which brought that program that they had. It was just an electioneering program.
That's correct. It was just an election.
To an end. So they are physical documents, Adam.
Davina?
Davina, you have the floor again.
Yes, thank you. Can one of the panelists say what is the AFC's position on the Payara audit that is yet to commence, even though the 2-year timeline outlined in the PSA has already elapsed? And we know that the expiration date on Yellowtail is also closing in. So can someone from the AFC just give a comment?
I'll start, Vince. I think Kamraj, I think all of us, we want to jump into this. Davina, we are in a terrible state. We can't even get the audit for the pre-contract audit, which was finished in 2020, completed by GRA in 2020, and an international firm out to England, Canada, we can't even get a copy of that. The one for the post, the Lisa one, the second audit, which was done by a combination of local firms. You heard during the budget debate that we are supposed to get it at the end. The president promised it at the end of December. You haven't reached it. During the budget debate, the Minister of Natural Resources promised it would be here at the end of this month, March, the third quarter. We haven't got it. And I do believe that though there is where there's smoke, there's always fire. I do believe that though that the audits, the first one, the pre-contract audits, as I think several economists and accountants are saying, will reveal Exxon's billing habits, will reveal how Exxon bills, how they bill for the cost recovery process. And that is why it's been delayed. I said publicly that when asked, the Minister of Natural Resources set up, they have handed the audit report to Exxon for their comments. And obviously, what the audit would reveal is that, we are being billed for all sorts of a manner of things, and the public outcry would be so great. I'm sure the public, for the very first thought, would be so great that it will make it untenable for them to continue doing it. Obviously, the second audit will also reveal that, that that's for almost $7.98 billion US. So the idea is, and I'm sure Vince would tell you, the idea is that we should never, ever, ever, as a country, reach a state of cost recovery. Vince would elaborate on this, but the idea of we should never get to a state whereby the 50-50 cost recovery process will kick in. The idea is to obviously just keep delaying, and then obviously they would delay these two audits, I do feel, until after the 2025 elections, because it will show that how their inaction and poor management of the oil sector, the management of the oil sector is so poor and deficient. So I'm sure I can guarantee you, I almost guarantee you, you wouldn't get an audit out of them for the next year and a half as well. Vince?
Oh, absolutely. The answer to that question would take us all day, David, and you touching on the key points here. But we get back to governance again. Let's look at who this is benefiting. Okay? It's benefiting Exxon more than anything else. And like I and many others have said, is there anybody's doubts in anybody's mind that Exxon is fundamentally now running this government? Look at the environmental issues. Everything that Exxon wants, they get. Exxon writes those permits. Everything that goes into those permits, like the flaring and the fee, it's benefiting Exxon. Extending the flaring, dumping of water and not re-injecting it, it's benefiting Exxon. It's the same thing here. You're not doing an audit. Exxon, without scrutinizing exactly what we're paying for, it's the most egregious thing. The taxpayers of this country does not even know what we're paying for. I read an article here in the Kaichor News, Dr. Hunt. One of the more eminent, writers here on this subject. And Dr. Hunt is trying to come up with a number to determine what is the cost per barrel of oil produced. What's the production cost per barrel of oil? And I keep telling people that's an impossible task. We're taking ourselves down the rat hole. And let me tell you why. We getting carried away with this 75%. It is not, the cost is not 75%. We're using that as a basis for calculation. It does not cost us 75%. All that 75% is therefore is an artificial number to calculate our profit on so that we can get our 12.5%. What the contract says, that's the highest that they could charge for any 1 month as a production cost, so that we can ensure we get our 12.5% when you split the 25%. We do not know if it's costing us 80%. We do not know if it's costing us 90%. We do not know if it's costing us 98%. But guess what the contract also says? That everything over and above that 75% that they charge us goes over into the next month, and into the next month, and into the next month forever. So we do not know what is it costing us. So besides the audit and everything else. And is that what they're trying to hide? Really? So don't get carried away. 75 is an artificial number to calculate everything. So that is why I and others have always said that with that carryover cost every month, plus there's no ring fencing, and I know for a fact during the coalition, I know Dr. Bino was fighting Exxon like hell to have ring fencing. That was his top priority. All of that has been thrown aside. Without no ring fencing, which means they can charge as much as they want for anything as they want, it doesn't matter. with this carryover of money and the cost of it and the interest that we pay, I am betting a whole lot of people that I do not know when we're ever going to get to getting to this where profit is going to be 50%. It's 20, 25 years before this project is over. And so so that is what Exxon is hiding, and the government is aiding and abetting them by hiding this cost. We have to know what these costs are, for every single thing that you do. That's the way that normal governments are run. I was part of it in the United States government. We used to have our people sitting in the same offices with the contractors, sharing the same software, access to the same information. So there could have been any hiding. That is what's going on now with this whole audit scheme. And the thing is, it's so brazen because the government is losing money by the billions, and it doesn't if the government really doesn't care. That's the situation we have.
What I would like to add to that, Davina, is that the Ghana government is also allowing itself to be placated by virtue of all these other initiatives that Exxon too is now saying, well, we're going to give you money for the Palmyra ground. It is called what is called a Greater Ghana Initiative from Exxon, $20 billion. So the Ghana government now has somersaulted on renegotiation and review, but is saying that, we're going to need some more money, and you can put up a sum, call it the Greater Ghana Initiative, and so it could give us $3.4 billion to do a Palmyra ground. And so the Palmyra Stadium, and so that they will go to their regions that they're popular and spend $3.5 billion on a project like that. Exxon is happy because Exxon minting money, and Exxon is getting them not to row. And what they get out of it, as I said in my statement, is that we don't deliberate this $3.4 billion in the National Assembly. We don't even have anything to do with it. I don't think it will suffer the scrutiny of an Auditor General's report, and so on. And so it is what is called a bypass of our financial arrangement. And they will say that, at least we get a $3.4 billion from Exxon. The thing is a one big scam. And the institutional governance that you require in relation to monies like that, we will not, at least Exxon and so on, will not be suffering from it, or the government itself. How are you going to make a Palmyra Stadium and you did not talk about it in the last budget? We don't know this money now, as far as we heard, the money coming in from a $20 billion that Exxon put up as Greater Guyana Initiative. Even went to procure for the money, the building that is. We ain't got no procurement process, and they gone and give somebody Green Caribbean Construction Inc. We don't know if these people know how to make stadium. And that is why I'm saying that the corruption behind these ministers, that elite branch, because when you ask some of the other members of parliament, by me and all going on, I don't know what's going on. And that is what, and as I have been begging you people also in the reporters, elite here, we got to check out what is Jagdale doing there. It is just to control the finances and the power. Because after 2 terms, he's supposed to go. And we patterned ourselves under the American system. 2 terms and he's gone. But he's there and he's doing all of it. It's a shame.
Davina, just let me give you a quick example and how we've been misled. And I use Exxon's headquarters as an example. Exxon and the tender for Exxon's headquarters was given out before 2020. Because since 2018, Exxon indicated they want to give a headquarters. I mean, it's all background. If you Google it, you will see that when the contract was awarded, I think in either late 2019 or 2020. And the contract, and you check it, was given out for 2 buildings which will house 250 persons each. Obviously, and it was support, and you can do the press release from Exxon, and it is to support the operations for Exxon for the next 40 years. Well, I myself was amazed to hear that it was it's now $160 million, and the vice president himself got up to say that circumstances have changed. That's why the numbers in 2020. The project was under $52 million or thereabout in total US dollars. It's now $160 million US dollars. Nothing has changed. They're still building. I checked my records and I found the write-up. It's same. 500 persons will be housed there. There's nothing. They haven't added on an extra floor. They haven't added on an extra building. It's the same thing. And he simply allows Exxon to say they're now going to spend $160 million US dollars on a headquarters. And he defends it by saying the circumstances have changed. No one tells you what new circumstances it is. Every single, we have had developed new discoveries since, but by the end of 2020, we already had 23 or 24 discoveries. So when they started, they went out to bid. When they went out to bid in 2019, 2020, the project was designed to take care of every single thing that we have now and more. Yet the project price has tripled. So you see, those are the things and of course, the main defender of the 3 times project cost is the Vice President Jaguar. He just gives a very gentle thing, says, circumstances have changed. Exxon has to do more work. No, hogwash. Go back and check Kaichur News, check Stabrook News, check their Exxon press release. 2 buildings, each to house 250 persons. There's architectural impression as well, which I found. Exact same thing is being done now. Nothing has changed, but the cost. And the government, the PPP.
$100 million more.
$100 million more.
Thank you very much. I just want to follow up very quickly on the audit. Given its importance, how does the AFC intend to force the PPP into conducting these timely revisions into the expenses billed to us by Exxon?
Well, first thing is we're going to wait on the last deadline, which is the deadline that is supposed to be end of the month. It's another 21 days. And then obviously I do think that maybe we can even look to move to court or something like that, because obviously they have a contract. We could probably even ask the Public Procurement Commission to examine the outcome, because we have 2 contracts, 2 sets of contracts which they have given out, one for the pre-contract and now the second one for the post-contract, the second set, and none have been made public, none have been completed. So therefore, obviously, we can probably start looking at either legal action or even asking the Public Procurement Commission to look at that, to address it, because obviously, this is the people's money, have been paid. I know that we paid for the first one, the pre-contract, we paid them in full, and nothing has been delivered. So obviously, that's a breach of contract situation. And we'll obviously go through a parliament as well. Once again, we have to note though that the Natural Resources Standing Committee for Natural Resources hasn't met for 3 years, and obviously that would have been another avenue which is it's not afforded for us. But we will look at all avenues, including legal recourse.
And I just want to add to that is your function as reporters and journalists. You have to ensure that these things that we are talking about here goes to members of the public out there. The ordinary Guyanese must understand how we are being scammed, how the corruption is happening, how these rise in prices of $100 and something million is now the effective price for 2 buildings that initially cost $52 million. Even if steel price gone up or cement price gone, it cannot be $100 million US dollars. Who are going to be beneficiaries of that increased pricing? What is the scam in happening here? And it is so fundamental that this fourth estate, remember we got legislature, executive, judiciary, but the fourth estate is called journalists and the proprietors of people like the Starbuck newspaper and Kite and so on. They must play a big role in proving by virtue of all these bits and pieces of evidence that we got a rigging of the system, as it were.
Folks, it's been an hour and a half now, and I do think we need to wrap up. So a final question from Davina, and then after this, thank you for being with us. Davina?
All right. Earlier, I had asked about the AFC's position on this EIA that has been waived for the power plants. I did ask whether the party or some of its representatives will be writing to the EPA to state on record its disapproval for this decision. So can you say officially whether this will be done, or your way of saying or voicing your concern against this decision?
Davina, everything is on the table, obviously, and if we have to, we will do as we've done before. We haven't written it so far, but it's something that still remains on the table.
Maybe we can also write it through the parliament and as the respective.
I think we can do that as well.
But let me put that into perspective here, though.
Vince, you have to wrap up. It's an hour and a half. Huh?
Yeah. Look, how many hundreds or probably thousands of letters have been written to the EPA without getting response. Look, Ms. D News, she writes a letter every single day that they do not respond to anything. So I don't know. I mean, it looks good, but I agree with David that we should, but just again to show you the way that things are being done, it just if nobody cares about what the people think.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you. If anybody has any other questions, you can contact us directly. Thank you very much for joining us, and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Good afternoon. Sharad.
Good afternoon.